Hello everyone, my name is Chris, and I've been playing D&D since I was 12, and I have been a Dungeon Master since I was 15. Due to the current circumstances, I won't be streaming regular stuff for a good while. And not everyone knows this, but I am not only a D&D enthusiast, but I'm also an indie game developer. I have been indie game development for almost 4 years now, and I'm working on 2 projects at the same time, with enough ideas for other projects to fill the Library of Congress. My primary project here is my baby, my pride and joy, and my primary focus. Now, why am I telling you this? Well, a couple of weeks ago, a game jam was kicked off called Adventure Jam. What is Adventure Jam? Well, Adventure Jam is called a game jam, which is a game design contest centered around a primary theme of adventure. I first competed in Adventure Jam back in 2017, and used my own experiences with mental illness as a sort of inspiration. I used it as a way to spread awareness of mental illness. A few things I need to point out. This was my first time entering a game jam, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was using a game engine that I was completely unfamiliar with, that being RPG Maker VX Ace. The contest was for 14 days, but circumstances gave me only 10 of these days. And I also worked 30 plus hours a week at the time. So I not only was completely new to it, but I had never made a game before a day in my life. So I had never really done any beta testing phase or trials and feedback and so on. I had never done any of that, nor did I know anyone on such short notice that could help me with it. I was also unfamiliar with the platform I was using and was in a bit over my head. I was kind of in a bind to work with it too. I have never even ironed out an idea for a game at this point, learned any coding language, or had experience making a game with any engine whatsoever. So this whole world was completely foreign to me. And finally, I was on a time crunch, and one crunch that was much shorter than others had. And even then, it was a short time crunch, only 2 weeks. I was running against the clock, burning time learning a system that was completely alien to anything I'd ever done before. And I was racing against the hourglass here. However, once I was able to submit my finished project, Dream of Mayweather, link in the description if you'd like to give it a try, I had to wait for weeks from the results, not only from judges, but community voting as well. After weeks of nail-biting and self-assurances, as well as one particular individual who told me I wouldn't do well, the results were released and I'd found that 118 other games had been entered. So I was drowning in a sea of over 100 other more experienced and withered game devs and teams, and I was a literal noob, waiting for the hammer of failure to fall down on me. I checked it daily to see if the judging was over, expecting to see myself at the bottom of the barrel. I will say that I was very surprised at the results, but I'm going to take a quick pause from that and use this as a segue into this video's topic, and one I'd been seeing a lot of lately. People on various Facebook groups I'm a part of have been asking their communities for help with being a new DM, and wanting tips on how to go about surviving on the other side of the big screen. I will just go ahead and say that each group is different, and there are really no right answers to this. There are plenty of things you can do wrong, but that would be an endless task to list. Let me instead tell you about my first time DMing. This was back in high school, and I will just say that high school was not a particularly fun time for me. From bullying at school and even worse at home, there wasn't a whole lot of things that gave me the kind of escape that D&D did. My first time DMing, I honestly could not tell you what the adventure was, what the plot was. I remember only roughly a handful of friends at the time, so there are a lot of gray areas in the details. However, I do remember what it was like to do it for the very first time. And honestly, the feeling of sitting behind the screen for the first time was identical to my first time entering Adventure Jam. I had never DM'd before, and I was entirely new to it. Had never even written a dungeon crawl or even been in a game for long at all. I was brand spanking new to Dungeons & Dragons, and I've only been playing for 3 years at the time. And even then it was very sparse due to that not being so pleasant childhood. I had no idea what other books I needed, what other materials or map building stuff I needed, or how any of the classes worked without having played them. I'd only played an Elven Ranger and a Dwarf Fighter in the past. I had no idea how paladins or wizards worked at the time. I also had short notice to do it, because idiot me told my friends at the time that I had something planned, which was a lie. I had a story in my head but nothing on paper, so I was on a tight crunch here. So how did I go about DMing for the first time? I would like to say simple, but it sure as sunset was not remotely simple. I was nervous as all can be. I had no idea what the detailed rules were, let alone any stats of any monsters outside of the base stats from the starter set. And I also used a map that came from that set for the rooms, so they all began to look fairly similar over time. I didn't think I would do well, but I tried anyway. I wanted to, and yes, I was terrified of looking completely stupid and useless, but I jumped in the cockpit with my little ideas, a handful of dice, and a lot of hope. Let's go back to Adventure Jam. The judging for Adventure Jam had 8 different categories and consisted of things like puzzles, visuals, and music. I aimed for characters and story, focusing on those rather than trying to kill myself pushing for everything. Not every game in the Jam was entered in every category, but in both categories I aimed for, there were roughly 100 or so entrants. This meant that there were 99 plus games alongside my measly first attempt at any game. In the story category, my entry, Dream of Mayweather, placed number 24 out of 103 entries. This meant that, with my passion and drive, no matter the odds, I placed higher than over 75% of the entries, many of which I'm certain were more experienced than me and had taken years of courses in programming and likely had made several other projects in the past. In the characters category, Dream of Mayweather placed 28 out of 100 entries. That meant that I placed higher than 75% of the other entries, which were more the same merit as the previously stated category. Overall, out of 119 entries, Dream of Mayweather ranked number 38 overall. I placed first in none of these, but I placed far higher than I had any right to expect. Sure, this may all seem like, at a glance, for me to gloat, but that isn't the point of this comparison. The point of this is to show that, even though you may not be experienced or have little time, have no idea what you're doing, or up against people who are more skilled than you, all you really need, in the end, is drive and passion. Focus on what it is you want from the experience. As a DM, you have a lot on your plate, but that gives you options to choose from in terms of what you want to get out of the experience. Want to give your players tough and rewarding fights? Then focus on monsters and combat. Want a rich and immersive story? Then look to the pages of history or your favorite books for inspiration, or put careful detail into your cities, towns, NPCs, and interactions. You have a lot to tackle as a new DM, but try not to see it as a daunting task and instead look at it as an opportunity to try something new, one step at a time. Do you need to know everything? Of course not. I never will, and on occasion I rely on my players to point things out that I don't think about or I didn't even notice. So, what are my tips on how to be a good DM? Number 1. Focus on a small amount of aspects of the game. Make them your priority above anything else. Number 2. Don't worry about knowing everything. No one ever does. And number 3. Make sure, always, including yourself, that everyone is having fun. It doesn't need to be serious. It can be goofy. Just be sure to have a good time. This isn't to say that you shouldn't get any books and not familiarize yourself with the game mechanics or how to go about creating a world and operating in it. I advise getting any source book you want, but they aren't holy text. Just do the best you can with what you have and make sure you enjoy it, no matter the outcome. You will no doubt walk away from the experience knowing a bit more about yourself, your friends, and the game itself. Thank you guys so much for watching. This was a fun one to cover and also gave me an opportunity to have some shameless promotion. I really honestly think it the best thing to do as a DM, especially if you're new, is simply to figure out what you want to get from the experience and make sure everyone is having fun, whether you're running a pre-made module or running a homebrew. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and like this video as well. It lets me know that I'm doing something right by you guys. Unfortunately, streams at Cape Fear Games are off the table until further notice. but I may in the future stream various video games and game development to sort of fill the gap. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, may all your roles be a critical success.